Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting of the 4th of May. It sounds funny saying that, doesn't it? The 4th of May. We'll open the meeting at 1 p.m. Please be seated. In opening the meeting, the City of Launceston acknowledged Tasmania's Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of this land. We pay respect to elders past, present and future, as they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and the hopes for generations to come. We recognise and we value Aboriginal histories, knowledge and lived experiences, and we commit to being culturally inclusive and respectful in our working relationships with Aboriginal people. In opening the meeting, we note that all councillors are present. Can I remind councillors and members of the public that this meeting will be recorded and is also being live streamed, and if mobile telephones could please be switched off or to silent. Item 3 of the agenda, declaration of interest. In accordance with Part 2, Regulation 8.7 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations of 2015, elected members are requested to indicate where they may have any pecuniary or conflict of interest in respect to any matter appearing on today's agenda. Are there any councillors wishing to declare such an interest? Item 4, the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of April. Someone to move? Thank you, Councillor Britton. And a seconder, Councillor Palmer. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Item 5 of the agenda, council workshops 5.1, council workshop report meetings held on the 20th and the 27th of April. Someone to move the item? Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. A seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dawkins, do you wish to speak to the motion?
As usual, a thorough suite of briefings. The ongoing planning sessions that we're having, I think, have been really beneficial. I've not really stopped thinking about the idea of borrowed amenities since the last one. I think that's a really important concept and something that's really quite difficult for us to be able to explain to the community. But yes, always good to get ongoing professional development.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Seconder, Councillor Harris. Do you wish to speak? Any councillors wish to speak to the item? Councillor Dawkins, anything further? We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That's all councillors present. The motion is carried. There are no items. 6, council leave of absence. Item 7, community reports. No community reports today. Item 8, public question time. 8.1, public questions on notice. 8.1.1, a response to Susan Rafferty's question regarding Invermay siren. 8.1.2, question from Ron Baines, particular to the Princess Theatre, the Birchells and the circular economy. 8.1.3, a question from Ray Norman with regard to community consultation processes, and the answer is provided. 8.2, public questions without notice, and I'll ask, please, Kelsey to read our guidelines.
If you're participating in public question time, please move to the microphone at the rear of the council chambers and state your name and address. You may then ask up to 3 questions. Please direct your questions to the Mayor. The Mayor may refuse to accept a question. If this happens, reasons will be provided. If your questions are accepted, they will either be answered at this meeting or taken on notice and answered at a future council meeting. Debate or discussion about questions or answers is not permitted. Please note that only the questions asked at today's meeting without preamble will be published in the council minutes.
Great, thank you very much, Kelsey. Questions without notice, please come forward.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Do I need to? Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I have 3 questions today.
Just your name and address.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Jim Dickinson, 261 West Hamer Road, Riverside. Okay. So the report today on the Albert Hall is 100 pages long, which is fairly substantial, but there's probably only the first 10 that are really relevant to the current situation. And it basically ends up making the statement that the project cannot be built for the budget. That fairly clearly is stated all the way through. I saw a couple of head nods, so I won't elaborate on that. So the point is, to keep the project going, it probably needs a rethink, and at the moment it is proposed to demolish the east wing. So the question is, why does the east wing need to be demolished? If it wasn't demolished, we could just extend the existing foyer. It could be easily made twice as big in the same area where it is, and extending the foyer or having a large foyer is two of the points mentioned in the reports as desirable things to try and attain. So the question is, why does the east wing need to be demolished? Why cannot the existing foyer be increased? That would cost nowhere near $11 million. There'd be plenty of money left over to do the other works.
Thank you so much for the question. So I think what will happen is the way forward with regard to the report that's been provided for councillors will be determined at 15.1, but councillors have obviously heard your question and heard your view. They've read your view in terms of the emails that you've provided us with. It's valued, it's appreciated, and it'll be further interrogated when we consider that item today.
Yeah, okay. Question number 2, the report says the report is to propose options to ensure the successful delivery of the project. That's on the first page. So the report is to propose options. What options are in the report that's been proposed? I couldn't see any. What are the options that have been proposed?
Thanks, Mr Dickinson. Mr Eberhardt, General Manager, are you able to provide some additional clarity with regard to the report and the aim of the report?
So the aim of the report is just to provide an update to the community and councillors in terms of where the project's at. In terms of delivering so this is not just a construction project, it's also about how we're operating the hall into the future. So we're still working through many options on how the project gets delivered, how the hall's managed. We haven't made any of those decisions. This is purely an update on where the project is at.
The report says the proposals are in the report, so you're not in the report. You've proposed no options in the report.
So the outline of the works and what's contained within the stages of the works is contained within that the attachment, as you say, 100 pages. What councillors are doing today is they are looking at the progress or the challenges that have impinged upon the process to this point, and we'll interrogate that at item 15.1. Okay,
and question 3, quite often through the report, probably at least 5 or 6 times, it states that value management design works have been undertaken or are being undertaken. So what are these value management design works that have been undertaken?
Thanks, Mr Dickinson. General Manager, are you able to provide a response?
So value management is a common process used in delivery of many capital projects, as we've done for many years, and what it is it's about looking through the scope of the project, determining where there's opportunities to save money. Can we use cheaper fixtures? Can we do this a different way? And so it's working through all the items to determine whether there's a better or cheaper way of doing it. So that's a process now that we've actually gone through twice.
It's still not an answer. I mean, the report, after 7 months since SHAPE have been come on board, you had 7 months to work all that out, and this report of a couple of days ago says that's all been considered. Well, what has been considered? Nothing.
So, Mr Dickinson, I've allowed you an extra question there because I really appreciate your passion for the city and the project. There's no denying there have been some challenges outside our control with the project. That's the purpose of the report that's being considered by councillors today. We can either determine to accept or to re-tender or do a variety of things as per the report today. So thank you for your interest. The General Manager's provided a response to your question. I invite you to stay behind, obviously, if you'd like to listen to the consideration of the item at 15.1.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions without notice?
Good evening. I have 3 questions.
Just your name and address, thank you.
Jess Hoyle, 26 Hazelwood Parade, Ravenswood. I'm a ratepayer. I own my own home. So here are my 3 questions for you. With all the current issues at the swimming pool regarding males in the female toilets, why do we not have a trauma-informed policy with respect to women's changing facilities and toilets, especially where we have little girls using these facilities?
So thanks for the question, and we'll take the question on notice because there's some rather serious connotations with regard to the question. The first thing that I would say quite outright is that we don't have current issues with regard to males in the female toilets.
Well, we actually
But what
do.
we will do is provide a detailed response to your question. Your views on members of our trans community are well known. Our views,
This hasn't got anything to do with trans.
regard.
This is not.
Sorry,
anything
I'm
to do with
providing an
trans,
answer to
Mayor.
your question.
No, your question is, what you're giving me is irrelevant. So you're saying it's okay for a male body person like a Leah Thomas with a penis to get changed in front of an 8, 9-year-old girl. That's pretty predatory to me. Okay, as a woman and as a victim of sexual assault and child molestation, I don't like that at all. And I think what you're doing is misogyny. No, there are rights and there are demands. So here's my second question to you,
So
Mayor.
I'll just respond to your first to say detail will be provided.
So question number 2, were you aware on the 3rd of March 2023, a man was in the female toilets with the door open? This is irrelevant to the trans issue, okay? This is a proper man, a pervert, a male. Now, there is CTV footage of him being in the women's toilets for 90 seconds. 90 seconds. 2 mothers reported this to the pool and made a complaint. Okay? And one of these mothers is pro-trans. And this man was not a transgender. Just to make this clear. All right? So, under the current investigation issues around you being the mayor, do you think or do you believe that you should be still standing in this chamber and acting as mayor of this town, especially when there are investigations into you by the Department of Justice?
Thank you for the questions. Questions 1 and 2 will be answered on notice. With regard to the question 3 about me, I've been very open and transparent with regard to the investigation that's taking place. When an outcome is arrived at, I will report that to our community. Until that time, I will continue in this role. Thank you. Are there any additional questions without notice? Let's move on to item 9, Planning Authority. Under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to items included in Agenda Item 9, Planning Authority. 9.1, 13 to 19 Dry Street, Invermay, Services Industry, change of use to a laundromat and new signs. Could we please read out our guidelines for speakers?
If you're speaking to an item on today's agenda, the Mayor will invite you to come forward to the microphone at the rear of the Council chambers. Please state your name and address. You may speak for up to 2 minutes, either for or against the recommendation. You'll hear this sound when you have reached your time limit. You may not ask questions or enter into debate with councillors or council officers. Your statement is not to be defamatory, inappropriate or abusive, or be intended to embarrass any person. The Mayor may direct you to stop speaking if you do not follow these rules, or if your statement repeats the points that have already been made.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone wishing to speak to item 9.1, 13 to 19 Dry Street, Invermay? No speakers? Okay, someone to move, please, a motion. Councillor Pentridge. What are you wishing to move, Councillor Pentridge? You're withdrawing that. Someone to move. Councillor Britton, what do you wish to move?
I wish to move an amended motion regarding the signage at the frontage of the building.
So you've got an alternate motion that you're using, Councillor Britton?
An alternate motion, I do.
That's good. And someone to second the alternate motion? Councillor Deputy Mayor, Councillor Garwood. So the alternate motion, you heard Councillor Britton reference that was particularly with regard to signage. Is that correct, Councillor Britton?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Councillors, you've also been provided with a copy of the alternate motion. Are there any clarifying questions around the alternate motion? So the alternate motion refers to the removal of a condition, 16, sign element not approved. The circular sign element of the upper level of the dry street facade of the building is not approved due to duplication of message resulting in unnecessary visual clutter. That's correct? Yep. Any other clarifying questions? Okay, Councillor Britton, do you wish to speak to the alternate motion?
No, only to say that we all went out and had a look at it. I believe we're all in agreement, and yep, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, not at this point. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just start with I think it's important that we do just give the defendants, or sorry, the representors some time in the sun to explain why we've arrived at the decision that we're at. In the motion itself, and I think you'll see there are a number of questions that have been raised by the representors. Firstly, about affecting their business. I think clearly that is not a planning issue. That's just a business matter which we need to deal with. Increase in traffic and noise along other emissions with the dryer filters and things like that, and 50 metres within a residential property. Again, that's all been explained. The road network can cope with all of that. How the dryers will be vented, which I'll come back with a question at the end of that, which is determined that it's actually not a planning issue. It's actually relating to the building works that will carry on post the planning stage. Too many laundromettes in the residential area. It's not a planning issue in relation to that. That's just competition. Increase in water usage. The applicants refer to as water and the conditions are included. Concern about the significant similarities of our signage. Again, this is not relevant to our planning. It's not considered the application will lead to any increase or unacceptable social behaviour with regard to the floor plan, limit of streetcar parking. Again, this has been used as a hotel and other things in the past, so it's actually had a broader use than what the current use is intended to be. And I think the other thing was about the hours of use that were there, and again, and the noise, the ambient noise that comes out onto the streets, which, you know, clearly in its previous use it probably had more noise that would emanate out onto the streets from a result of that sort of thing. So really, most of the issues associated with, and when I spoke to the representative about it today, I think the major factor is about how the machines will be wired in and vented effectively, and they believe that they can't be suitably done. As rightly stated by the planning officer, that isn't a planning issue, but I think for clarity purposes, and just to explain the process beyond the planning, should we approve this today, could the officer or an officer give an explanation in regards to what the building aspects of it, and when it goes to building approval, what
a building surveyor needs to do in relation to ensuring the venting is actually of appropriate standard.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. A question, Manager of Planning or Town Plan? No, CEO. Thank you.
So Councillor Britton actually asked that question to me this morning, so I've got it written here in front of me, so I'll just read it. So the development proposal has been assessed against the performance criteria 1731P1 and has been determined to comply. So that performance criteria requires that the use must not cause unreasonable loss of amenity to residential zones having regard to its environmental emissions, among other elements. So the assessing planner identified that there's sufficient physical distance between the proposed laundromat and the closest dwelling to achieve compliance with the requirement. But that assessment is also made in the knowledge that the laundrette will need to achieve a building permit before it's able to be constructed. So in order to be able to get a building permit, laundrettes must demonstrate compliance with the National Construction Code. The National Construction Code includes the requirement that contaminated air must be disposed of in a manner which does not unduly create a nuisance or hazard to people in the building or other properties. So that National Construction Code requirement will need to be met through the building permit in order for the building surveyor and ultimately the building permit authority to sign it off. The other thing to note on this is that the planning officers also recommended that there be a note included on the planning permit that reminds the proponent that they will need to comply with the Environmental Management and Pollution Control Act. So that Act regulates environmental nuisances and environmental harm in Tasmania. And in the event that there were to be a problem in the future, or if there were to be a problem in the future in respect of emissions, that Act would provide an avenue to be able to remedy it.
Thank you, CEO. Another question? No? Any further? A question, Councillor Kai, or a speaking?
A question. So, when all that goes through, does the representatives get notification as to no, they don't. Okay, I'm just looking at the CEO. So yes, so I was just wondering whether the representative will get notification as to the progress of, or how the applicant is going with the progress of the building permit.
CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. No, so building permits are different from a planning permit in that there isn't any community engagement around that. It's just through the applicant, their building surveyor, and any technical people that need to be involved, and then the council or the permit authority. So not the neighbours.
Another question, Councillor Kai.
So once the building permit is issued, so same thing, the community or the neighbours don't get notification? No.
Councillor Harris has a question.
Just to remove any ambiguity about what we have an alternate motion about, because we have the removal of a condition of a sign element not approved, which is sort of like two negatives. And so what I just want to ask the question to be 100% sure is that what we are doing are in fact approving 3 signs on this particular building.
So, Councillor Harris, this is the removal of the condition. So it was recommended that the signage wasn't approved as it was with regard to the number of signs. So you'll see at point A, removal of a condition. Manager of Planning, Richard, do you wish to further expand on that?
Only simply to say that the condition was to vary the plans as submitted, and removing the condition leaves the plans intact as applied for.
Thanks. Any further questions, Councillor Harris? Question, Councillor Walker.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It is in regards to that change of use, and of course it is through the building permit process where the nuts and bolts of how compliance can be achieved will be worked out. But it would appear that conceivably we could be in a position where someone asks for a change of use. At what point do you draw the line and say, well, that someone could ask for a change of use that's quite patently obvious cannot be achieved for that building, but at the same time, at what point in the planning process can we draw that line and say, that's not going to be applicable. At the moment, we're only being told, no, that will happen during the building permit phase. But at what length, at what point, when it comes to compliance with environmental conditions here, would we draw that line?
CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's hard to be definitive because you're dealing with specific situations. But in this case, if there was a house, say, 2 metres away, or there was a house without any area to be able to dissipate or to have treatment for be it noise or be it odours or be it other emissions, then you are quite within your right to say that performance criteria is not satisfied, and that's appropriate for the planning process. But in this case, we're saying that there is sufficient distance between the proposed emission and residents, and that the technology that would be implemented as part of the building permit is sufficient to be able to comply.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, another question? Happy? Councillor Dawkins to speak.
Just to go back to that element that is now will be approved if the alternate motion passes the table. When discussed on the bus, when we were looking at the building, we understood that there was a design suite had been presented on the building, and that removing one element of it would actually change the way that the designer had intended their marketing plan to fit within the context of that building, which is why we collectively decided that the heritage concerns that had been brought up, we didn't think, because the Heritage Council had no real interest in this building. It's on a local heritage register. Yes, it is of interest, but in order to be able to ensure that buildings have failed the test for the purpose that perhaps they've been most used for, if they're to have another life, we need to be able to expand the way that we look at these buildings to ensure that the person who's purchased it put an enormous sum of their money into that building to be able to redevelop it in a new way. We need to be able to allow them within the scope to be able to design elements around that to market their building as they see fit, which is why we've made this decision today.
Thanks, Councillor Dawkins. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, I might disagree somewhat with the previous speaker in terms of someone making their investment and then seeking to find an alternative use for that investment. It is a hotel. It was built as a hotel. It has a big bar in that area. If you buy a hotel, you might reasonably think that's the use that building was created for. If you bought a service station and then wanted to put a different business in there, that might be possible, it might not. But in this case, someone has bought this building. Point of order, Mayor, if you would. I don't need to be interrupted when I'm speaking. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Sit down. I'll accept the point of order. Councillor Dawkins.
Sincerely apologetic.
Councillor Dawkins apologises. Thank you. Please continue, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Sometimes lose my train of thought when I'm interrupted, but nonetheless, in this case, there's a large remainder of the building. We're talking about a small portion. In fact, the bar portion, so certainly won't be a hotel if the bar's removed. But it is of concern as to what the future use of the building will be. I mean, we're talking about, yes, it is a zone where this particular purpose is permitted, but it also, will contribute to changing the landscape of that immediate area. And I will say that particular area, where I do know quite a number of people who live in that area who are very proud of their inner city Inveresque environment, its history, but also the community that live and interact around there. Now, having said that, a laundrette is probably going to be of use to quite a few of those people. So I'm not against that particular use in that respect. My only concern is with, especially those environmental issues. If it was me who was living adjacent to this building, I would too have those concerns because I'm in a residential area and I'm not to know, especially, I know that there'll be compliance issues when it comes to the building permit, but I'm not to know whether that humming noise might keep me awake at night. I'm not to know if I will experience, odour or whatever it might be from this particular business. And that's, on the one hand, that's why I asked the question at the beginning, as to, where do we draw the line in those respects? And I thank the CEO for that answer. But I can understand people's concerns in that regard, and I'm sure everyone around the table can too. The signage I certainly don't have issue with, and I thank Councillor Britton for moving that amended modified motion. I think in many ways it is an appropriate use, but I am struggling with its particular vicinity of residential housing without knowing the final solutions that they are going to provide. Is it going to? It can't be venting through the roof. It has to be outside, and it probably will be at the back of the building, which does bring it, in a fairly close vicinity with that housing. So I would appreciate hearing from other councillors around the table, because I'm still undecided as to how I'll vote. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Are there any other contributions? Councillor Pentridge.
Look, Councillor Walker, I tend to agree, and he's covered most of the areas. I'm a little bit personally disappointed, and I can't support it. I think that the people who own the property have a right to get a return. But at the same time, if anyone drove around those streets, and which I have, there's some beautiful buildings there, and a lot of our community have put a lot of money and time, and I think Councillor Walker covered that pretty well. And I just think we would have had a better use for that hotel. And they're right, I can accept that no one's put their hand up and wanted to make it into a restaurant or a wine bar or even a hotel. And maybe that's just the change of the times. But aren't we out of kilter? And it's a pity, maybe not in this case, it's obviously too late to do anything about, but maybe can't we sort of look a bit clearer or look a bit closer, that when we've got a facility like that, it has been a hotel for a long, long time, that was patronised extremely well for a long, long time, turning it into an industrial use, which could have gone anywhere, which the industrial use of that building won't service the community that's developed all those buildings around it. And it's a bit sad to see that happening. So even though I'm supportive that everyone has the right to develop and get a return, I think we could have had a better use for that building. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pentridge. Just for clarity, Manager of Planning, in terms of the use, can we clarify that a laundromat is appropriate in the commercial zone?
It is a permitted use in the zone, so the application couldn't be refused on the use itself.
Thank you. Any other contributions from around the table? Any other questions? Councillor Harris.
I will. I like the other two speakers, Councillor Walker and Councillor Pentridge, probably lament the closure of the Inveresk Hotel and it now turning into a laundry. I guess because I actually believe that Inveresk actually offers the city a great opportunity for redevelopment into medium density housing, and corner hotels are in fact part of the attraction of something like that. But it is, as we said, applicable within the land use and zoning, so we can't stop it. I do have a question though, which I'll finish on, and it's about the noise from the dryers, which will exit the building into what I assume is the car park at the rear. And straight across from that, there's two houses in Balaclava Street, sorry, I think it is, and they're about 12 metres away. Now, they would be old houses with single glazing, unlike many modern houses with double glazing, which cuts a lot of noise out. And I'm just wondering, is there a building standard or otherwise of the noise that's emitted from a laundrette and what that would register 12 metres away? Because certainly I think if you were older, and many of those residents could be older because they could have lived there a long time, go to bed earlier than 11 o'clock at night. And so hence, having the droll noise of a dryer running while it's drying off, and in fact could even run over because someone might put it in at 5 to 11 and come back in the morning. So, you know, it could be much later than that the noise is being made. So I just want to understand the noise aspect and how this development application is able to meet that, and I forget what the word was that we were talking, but within the guidelines, I guess I'm saying.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Manager of Planning, Richard.
The recommendation for approval is premised on the basis that there is technology and skills sufficient to solve this problem. So we don't require them to specify their entirety of their system and select their machinery prior to them getting the in principle approval for their use. So there is nothing that would be unsolvable in this. It's a design issue and a specification issue, and that will be done at the building permit stage. This situation of commercial noise extraction equipment and air conditioners happens all the way through the CBD and all the way through the inner areas of Launceston. It's not an unusual situation, and it's one that's generally managed pretty well. I mean, there are some isolated examples where there has been tension between a residential use and a commercial use, but generally that's managed through the powers available to the council. So there's nothing in this at this time that council officers believe can't be managed just through the normal process of design development.
Thanks, Richard. A question from Councillor Britton. Oh, you'd like to speak? I'll come to you in a moment. Question from Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think a lot of the questions that we're having through this process are relating to the building code and the building side of, once we approve this today, if that's the way that the decision goes, how and what confidence can we give the community, can we give the residents of that area in saying that that will be managed? I think that's something that potentially is struggling with it at the table at the moment. Maybe if there was some kind of insight into the process and whether that is appropriate for today or not, I think that is one of the struggles, that if this is approved, we're basically approving things that don't exist at the moment. We're not approving because it's not our job, it's not a part of this planning process. But with that next process, is there just some confidence that we can be given here, that we can feel comfortable and that those representors and those who are investing can move forward out of this building perhaps with today? I don't know.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So hopefully the information I gave you is specific to the emissions in terms of the specific requirements of the National Construction Code would give you some certainty around that. In terms of the noise, it's a similar thing. But typically, to answer your question, it's depending upon the background noise of a specific area in terms of the noise that a source can emit. Typically, the rule of thumb, going back to my old environmental health days, is 5 decibels above background level in any particular area is what would be considered to be an unreasonable noise level. And so in assessing that application, they would need to determine that it's compliant with that. And again, we have mechanisms, if it's not compliant with that, under the Environmental Management Pollution Control Act, to be able to require that there be enhancements or acoustic treatments to properties, be it, there's heaps of different things you can consider. So there are means to be able to deal with it, but certainly it's preferable to deal with it through the building permit stage, and the controls are there and the regulatory regime to make sure it happens. But to give you some certainty, there's always legislation if it were to be a problem in the future.
A question from Councillor Harris.
Just on the ability, if you do add 5 dB to what? So do we take a background dB reading of what the site is at the moment? Is that something that council environmental health officers do at 6 o'clock, at 11 o'clock at night? Or is it just a broader general figure that's used?
CEO.
Many a time I've been out on sites in the middle of the night taking readings. So basically you need to have the unit turned off. You take the reading to understand what it is without, and then you take it with the unit going. If you're not able to turn it off, then you'd go to a similar area. So, a couple of streets over, for instance, so it's not impacted by the noise. Take that reading and then you compare that with the noise source. So.
Councillor Britton, I'll come to you in a moment as you close. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Britton, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mayor. I think this is an interesting one. It's got a lot of things or a lot of the representations have brought up a lot of different topics that I don't think we normally deal with. And because of that, maybe there is a bit of confusion. I myself have a lot of faith in the the process and the fact that this will be dealt with by the building code. It'll also be dealt with by the individuals who actually are installing the gear and maintaining that machinery. I've got a small bit of experience with this sort of stuff myself, and I can say that across the board, from the technician screwing the thing to the wall all the way through, obviously, to the building code, these things are monitored. So obviously, Michael answered my question this morning. I feel quite confident that all of these things will be addressed in the appropriate time frame, and therefore I'm very confident that passing today is not going to in any way allow anyone to do the dodgy, for lack of a better word. All of these issues will be dealt with in the future, and I feel very comfortable approving it today for its use.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. Those against? One councillor against in Councillor Pentridge. Councillor Walker, are you abstaining or you voted for? I beg your pardon. So one councillor against in Councillor Pentridge, 11 councillors for. The motion is carried. Thank you. Council no longer sits as a planning authority. Feel free to exit as you please. Okay, Council no longer sits as a planning authority. I said that. Item 10, announcements by the Mayor. 10.1, I would love to reference on Monday the 24th, it was our pleasure, the Council's pleasure, to host a reception for the HMAS Launceston ship's crew. In particular, it was wonderful given that the third HMAS Launceston is set to be decommissioned later this year, and as a result, wonderful to welcome them to Launceston for the purpose of Anzac Day. Speaking of Anzac Day, on Tuesday the 25th of April, it was our absolute pleasure to work with the RSL with regard to Anzac Day 2023. And CEO, I'd like in particular to recognise the work of Elizabeth Clark. It does take a whole team, but the fastidious planning undertaken by Elizabeth on behalf of Council is certainly appreciated. Okay, let's move to item 11, Councillors' reports. Councillor Mackenzie.
I'd just like to note the other event one of the other events you attended, which was on Monday to May the 1st at the AMC. I think those of us that actually got there on Monday got a huge enlightenment to what they actually do out there. I think of years gone by, people were saying the university are dumbing it down and people are going offshore, and there was conversations about the Pacific Islanders who were being trained here and now being trained in Queensland. And you might think that the world's on a really bad place, but certainly the conversations that we had and the things that we were shown around on Monday were unbelievable and world-leading stuff. So I'm very comfortable under the current leadership model that's there, that the AMC is going to be there for many years to come, delivering lots of different things which are world-leading stuff. I mean world-leading stuff. There are things where we're doing that nobody else in the world is doing, and people from all over the world are coming to do things here. They talked about, we lost quite a number of students as a result of the Pacific Islanders, and also in relation to COVID, people not coming out and therefore designing things where they were doing other things in their own countries as opposed to coming here. I think we're at the peak, something like about 1,200, I think, students on campus. We're something like 500 or 600 now, building to 900. But the comments made were the 500 or 600 and going to 900 is actually a really quality cohort, which will actually branch out and actually delivering a better outcome for the university over time. I said economically, not having 1,200 bodies running around here is actually having an economic adverse impact. But I think from an educational point of view, certainly the vision and the strategy that are being employed by the AMC suggest to me that we're in actually quite good hands in regards to what's going on there. And I'm looking forward to the future developments and the funding through the blue economy and even the issues that we're dealing with on the Defence Force and so forth like that, that we're actually a place of significant interest to Australia and beyond our shores.
Absolutely. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. Candlelight vigils were held around Australia last night to remember those who have lost their lives to family violence. A woman dies every week in Australia at the hands of their intimate partner. It was chilling when the 13 names of the women who have died this year were read out, knowing that for every one of those names read, there were children, there were brothers, mothers, sisters, communities who were affected by the continuation of gendered violence in our communities. It's up to all of us to call it out. It's up to all of us to have those difficult conversations where we know something we're seeing or hearing is not right, because I think that everyone who was there last night, all we want is to never have to attend another one of these vigils again. I'd just like to point out that the Minister was absolutely fantastic last night. She speaks so well. She spoke from her heart and she captivated the attention of everyone there, knowing that we're in good hands in Tasmania, and we hope that, as I say, we never, ever, ever have to attend another.
Hear, hear. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, and I perhaps should have gone before that one, but I do think that the representations that we make at the community events does show the diversity of the group that we have here. And I was fortunate on the 21st of April to head along to Ravenswood for Rave on Wheels for their skate park competition, and it was off the back of the incredible success that we had with the Nationals, where a lot of the guys, particularly Wilfred, there was the little guy there with his little watermelon helmet, he did quite well there too. So it was great to see the northern suburbs and how they really do engage with not just their own community, but the community surrounding them and Launceston into the city and further abroad to that with the Nationals that they were performing at and competing at. And yeah, it was a really, really lovely event. I think they did a fantastic job there. It was very well attended and a beautiful day in late April there at the Ravenswood Skate Park. And a lot of community consultation was said about facilities. And I know the Mayor, it's a big point for you to think about the availabilities for skate parks and where that is and the developments. But yeah, it's a great opportunity to converse with our northern suburbs.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Dr. Raze.
Thank you, Mayor. I was fortunate to represent the Mayor and the Council to attend the Trevelyan Bowls and Community Club on the 28th of April for presentation of medals. It was a great night. What impressed me most, to see more than 100 people of all ages, from 16 years old to 91 years old. It's a representation of how we would like the community to be. Healthy, happy, and active community. And this is what I feel sometimes. Isn't that wonderful if we can get the old full of wisdom and knowledge, work together with the young who are full of vision and energy. And I was really feel fortunate that I was participating in that evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dr. Raze. Councillor Britton.
Thank you, Mayor. Very quickly, I just want to echo what Councillor Mackenzie said. I was there at the AMC and Australian Maritime College, and it was an excellent day out there. It's amazing work they do. Secondly, on Saturday, the 8th of April, I forgot to mention last time, but I did head out there and open the Easter Croquet tournament at the Launceston Croquet Centre. I didn't know much about croquet before I went. I know a fair bit now. It's very cutthroat. It's good fun, actually. No, they were a lovely bunch of people. They do a great job out there. Full, very well done to their management team, their committee, and their volunteers. It's an amazing centre. And I just thought, best of luck to them. They are actually attempting to host the World Cup Federation Golf Croquet Championships in 2025. So good luck on that as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Just briefly, I, and along with Councillor Pentridge and perhaps some others, attended the dawn service, and I must say that the Anzac Day dawn service was probably as big as, probably only beaten by the 100-year celebration one, which probably had close to 10,000. Would have been at least 4,000 or 5,000 people there. And I can remember as a young child growing up with an uncle who served in the army in the Second World War, that Anzac Day parades were, dying, if you like, because as the veterans died off, people felt these things would not continue. But in fact, there were many, many people there, many youngsters up at dawn to pay their respects at 6 a.m. in the morning. I also attended the AMC visit and reminds us of this great facility, and I'll use it to leverage into another forum that I attended yesterday, which was the Northern Tasmania Development Regional Collaboration Forum with about 60 other community leaders, other councils and what have you. And one of the things that was obvious or mentioned at that forum was that we need more problem solvers in our community. And problem solvers, they are generally called engineers. And there are statistics that show the number of engineers per 1,000 directly affects the local community, the average earnings, etc. Somewhere like Silicon Valley has about 45 per 1,000. A normal community might have 10 per 1,000. We here in Launceston are considerably less than that. So, in fact, we have a wonderful training organisation called the AMC on our doorstep, who can not only produce engineers for shipping, but for all parts of engineering. And in fact, say to the others, anyone may be listening, that the opportunities being offered out there are world class, and we need more engineers, more problem solvers to help our community to grow and be more vibrant as we get, as things change. I also attended the LGAT's President's Forum, which was online with yourself. We had 5 of the 6 candidates, and we do have a number of very good candidates that we'll have to choose. So when the current LGAT President, Christina Homburg, steps down, there'll be someone else to be replaced, and we'll have some say on that. And also listen to the local government reform feedback session that is happening right now, and is something that everyone, any people who may be listening, should go online and have a look at their preliminary report, because by September this year, there will be in fact a report presented to government on how local government will be reformed. And that is not a very long time, because it is only less than 4 months away. So I do encourage anyone who has an interest, as in fact we as a council must be talking to our colleagues who are joining us about what local government reform will mean for us here in this state, because it is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to perhaps improve the way that we operate and set us up for the future rather than where we've come from in the past. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kai.
Councillor Pentridge and I attended the Local Governments Association of Tasmania's Planning Authority and Managing Growth Professional Development, held in Devonport on Friday the 28th of April. The morning session was probably the most important presentation for all elected members. It was presented by Planner Joe Oliver and was focused on learning about our role as a planning authority, which I found to be very helpful. One of the issues raised was to not let a tie vote happen. So, for example, 6 votes for and 6 votes against for a DA, where no valid decision could be made. It could be a nightmare with huge financial costs to the actual council when a tied vote happens. So this was made clear through other councils' experiences. One of the topics presented was about infrastructure changes. Put in simple terms, the infrastructure is like the engine and the DA is like the rubber tyre. So before we could approve more DAs, we must first make sure that there is sufficient infrastructure to support those DAs. To finish on a positive note, a trust and citizenship survey, quote, local councillors are consistently identified as the community's most trusted advisors for urban change. Now, this whole event was recorded, and I have asked Liz to see if she can obtain the recordings, and I'm hoping that the Mayor or the CEO could maybe allocate some time in one of our workshops to run through some of the matters that could help us improve our skills as councillors. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks, Councillor Kai. Councillor Pentridge.
Look, I'm just confirming that what Susie just said, and I thought it was a great day. But one of the things that was important to me, and it's about changing your mind. I mean, in light of, as Susie said, if there's a tie as far as votes, then it leads to quite a few implications. There is nothing wrong, and they actually suggested or complimented that it was appropriate if one person chose to change his position and support the other group, and that's not the wrong thing to do. And I thought that was a good point to make, because so often we're perceived by changing our minds that we really didn't know what we were talking about in the first place. But sometimes we have a list of things that we would like to see happen. On the other hand, if it's not going to happen in the majority, there's nothing wrong with changing your mind and supporting the other group. Well, you haven't changed your opinion, you've just changed your mind as far as that vote goes. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Pentridge and Councillor Kai. And I might just say I was intending to be with you on Friday in Devonport, but because we had an announcement from the Prime Minister for our stadium, it meant that I had to turn around and come back. So I'm pleased that you two were able to go, and it sounds like you got a lot out of it. Thank you. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor. I attended my first Sir Optimist International Launceston Club meeting last night as their patron, a group that transforms the lives and status of women and girls through education, empowerment and enabling opportunities, and have been doing so since 1921. And I'm very honoured to be their patron on the Mayor's behalf.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon. Any other contributions? Okay, let's go to item 12, questions by councillors. Questions on notice at 12.1, a question asked last time by Councillor Mackenzie regarding flexibility of payment options. An answer is provided there. Item 12.2, councillors' questions without notice. Councillor Kai.
This one is a question from a Launceston College student called Kuba, and he asked, could Launceston College students get discounted council parking? And I've given you his email address, so if you could reply to that. The second question is regarding the UTAS Stadium. So with the recent addition of the $65 million in federal funding, bringing the total to $130 million of funding, I was just wondering if some of this funding could be allocated towards the cost of the UTAS Stadium maintenance costs, annual maintenance costs, so that the City of Launceston Council could possibly look at not passing ownership to the state government.
Thanks, Councillor Kai. So I'll take question one first. We'll take that on notice with regard to student Kuba and provide an answer with regard to student parking. I might also say, just for your benefit and the benefit of councillors, that the issue of student parking is currently being considered by the Department of Education. Last year's student council body wrote to the then Minister of Education, Sarah Courtney, who did some preliminary work and has handed it on just with regard to provision of parking facilities. So we'll continue to monitor that for Kuba and also respond directly to the question. The second question regarding UTAS Stadium and the $130 million worth of funding, CEO, are you able to provide a response to that with regard to what it can be used for?
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, so it's limited to use in capital expenditure, so capital upgrade to the stadium. So it's not capable or possible to be able to access the money for maintenance purposes.
Any other questions without notice? No? Yes, Councillor Walker.
Sorry, I did put my hand up earlier and then I got lost in the discussion about the York Park Stadium. My question is, has Launceston Council contacted State Growth in regards to the intersection of the Midland Highway with the Kings Meadows interconnector, especially as concerns have been raised with me and as I have raised previously with Council for the off-ramp that does, usually after 5 p.m, get to a point where cars are backing up onto the highway and therefore one lane of the highway that is a 110 kilometre an hour highway has cars in a standstill position.
Thanks,
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Walker. CO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So Councillor Walker gave me the benefit of some prior warning to that question, thankfully. So yes, we have engaged with state growth about it, but clearly it remains a problem. Clearly it's an issue on a daily basis. So I think it's appropriate that we do re-engage them on it and look for any potential options that we might be able to investigate with them.
Councillor McKenzie.
Just a supplementary to that, because I did witness that coming home a couple of days ago, actually last night. In the interim, just from a safety aspect, and as Councillor Walker says, cars do go down both elements of that at 110 kilometres an hour. And if you lose concentration for a second and all of a sudden there's cars stopped, it may create. So just whether there's any adequate signage that might be at least warning motorists of the potential backlog is something that we could consider just feeding back to state growth.
CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And again, in the conversation with Councillor Walker, there's a number of options we talked about, but again, neither of us are engineers or road authority. So I think I'm happy to take that suggestion to the road authority, which in this case is the state government, and work through different options that I understand. And because certainly the longer term option is to increase the capacity of the roundabout. Clearly, that's a fair way off. So I think it's appropriate to explore some shorter term solutions or options. So,
Councillor McMahon.
Just in respect to that, I can confirm that through the Safer Communities Committee, we have sent a letter to the State Growth requesting that there be an illuminated sign during certain times of the day. But unfortunately, to this point, we haven't had a response.
Your question is, can we note it? The answer is yes. Are there any other questions without notice? Let's move to item 13, notices of motion. 13.1, notice of motion from Councillor Dawkins, financial support for veterinary practices treating injured wildlife. Moved, Councillor Dawkins. A seconder, Councillor McKenzie. There are no speakers listed. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. I approached the CEO after I noted that Meander Valley Council passed a similar motion offering support to the vets in their LGA. Obviously, we have many more in ours, but no less a problem. So just by way of setting this up, I guess if we talked about this 10 years ago, vets might not have considered that there was an issue. But over the last 10 years, some things have been occurring, and I guess especially amplified during COVID. So the number of veterinary practice students every year is declining. The number of companion animals in homes is increasing. And that is causing a significant bottleneck at vets around the country. They've got an incredibly high suicide rate, which I don't know that many people are aware of, which is terribly disturbing. It's a high anxiety profession. From the reports that I get, that people come, very anxious people who are very concerned for their animals, come into vet surgeries, unable to pay the price of a vet fee. And vets are faced with a barrage of complaints and abuse that I think is beyond their capacity to endure. So if we believe that we need vets in our community, it's incumbent on all of us who have got some way to access funds to be able to assist them. So one way that the CEO noted that the City of Launceston could assist vets in our LGA is by initially offering zero body disposal for native animals, because of course many of the native animals that are brought into vet surgeries in Tasmania or in Launceston are ill or injured, mostly injured on our roads. So my understanding is that vets in this situation would make a call based on what they believe the outcome would be and the tools at their disposal. So if it's an endangered animal, they will go above and beyond to save that animal and then look for a network of carers to take care of it and bring it back to health. If it's not an endangered animal and in pain, then it will be euthanized. And the very least that we can do, and I feel like it is the very least, is to help them dispose of those bodies by making it a zero waste charge. The other element of this motion is to investigate other ways. So we could go to the Tasmanian division of the AVA, the Australian Veterinary Association, and ask what capacity City of Launceston could have to assist further in supporting vets in our community. I think this is very little to ask. We don't need today come up with any of the solutions. We need to ask the experts the question and let them report back to us and then report back to council and to the community of what we could do to assist further. So with the changes also to the Cat Management Act, which means that people are way more alert to the rules around cats and where the hotspots are for cats in the community, we absolutely need our vets to be on our side to do everything they can to work with communities because, of course, council is tasked with any animal at large that is an owned animal in our community. We have no capacity to be able to do that. We need vets to help us. We need every charity, every cat management facility, every community group tasked with assisting us to help us because under the Act we're tasked with something that we simply cannot achieve. So the very minimum we can do now is ask the vets who help us what we can do to help them.
Thanks, Councillor Dawkins. Seconder, Councillor, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Question, Councillor Pentridge.
Look, I agree with what Councillor Dawkins just said, and just for a suggestion, it's one of the few things that I think the council do extremely well. Whenever we get, I'm on Henry Street there, whenever I've rang and said, look, there's a dead animal on the road, that animal's been removed within a very short period of time, which I think is excellent. And maybe just as a suggestion, and as far as this council goes, our contribution to helping our vets, why can't we have a run once or twice a week? We have had some conversation this morning. I don't know that I want them kept in my beer fridge until we come and pick them up, but there is things we could do. And I think, would it be out of the question to send a council vehicle around the vets, there's not that many of them, and dispose of the animals on that day, as we do with with hospital waste on specific times. So I think we ought to consider it. Okay.
So, Councillor Pentridge, your question is in point 2, as a specific example, can we look at investigating that with regard to measures that the City of Council might be able to employ? Sounds good. Seconder, Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor, and I just congratulate Councillor Dawkins for bringing the motion. I think she put it together in a really sensible way. A small thing that we can do straight away, which is just allowing bodies to be, and we're talking native animals, be sent to our tip sites without any charge. And I think the question and where Councillor Pentridge has come from as part of that investigation, I guess, is what are the other things that we can do. So I think it's a really good thing. Just a big shout out to the vets that work in our community and do wonderful things in this respect. And also, I think Bonnerong was mentioned in there as well. And I think just the amazing work that group do to rescue animals is just amazing. So I just wanted to shout those out and just congratulate the work they do. And if we can do something even as small as the first item in the first instance, but look at other options that we can do, I think that is the least that we could do.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Any other contributions? Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Dawkins, for bringing this to our attention by a notice of motion through you, Mayor. And I do rise to wholeheartedly support the motion. I note the suggestions that have been made around the table, and I do note also as a council that we do give concessions community concessions to various groups, especially charities, when it comes to waste management in their businesses. I suppose this is seen as a slightly different category to that, in that we're not expecting the veterinarians to have to apply by those normal community sort of concession process, and I think that is completely understandable. But I suppose I'm just mentioning that because it is noted that council do this for other concerns, usually community groups or organisations, not-for-profit organisations. And in this case, yes, I'll be interested to see the different approaches that can be taken here, such as the suggestion by Councillor Pentridge that it may be put on that that we can use our services to assist rather than every veterinarian having to organise a trip to the tips. So yeah, wholeheartedly support. And likewise, this, does put a spotlight on the amount of animals, native or otherwise, that are injured on our roads, and therefore an opportunity for council to, emphasise that, people should definitely take care. We're the roadkill capital of the country, if not the world, and anything that we can do to reduce that and to support those people who are having to deal with the aftermath is to be commended. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Dr. Raze.
Just a comment. I wholeheartedly support Councillor Dawkins about the motion. It is a tragedy when we drive in the morning and see so many corpses of animals, lying there. I think it's important also to remind people how it's important to be careful, especially roads now. Animals are getting near the city because sometimes it's lack of food as well. So we have to, education is important to keep reminding them about the danger for animals. My also concern is not just about actually injuring animals through traffic. I feel quite concerned sometimes when we see all these lovely rabbits hit by caliciviruses, and we watch them dying slowly. At least with the animals, say, oh, let's take them quickly, take them to the vet. They can do something about it. But what do you do about these rabbits were hit by the calicivirus? And we are compassionate, but that's what they are suffering too, and partly might be contributed because we are introducing viruses. Just to show you the tragedy of the animals suffering, in our communities, how we have to remind the community about the importance of taking care when we drive at night.
Thanks, Councillor Dr. Raze, and we note Councillor Kai departed the meeting at 2:11. Are there any additional contributions? Councillor Dawkins, do you wish to close?
Thank you, and thank you for the contributions. I think this is a largely uncontroversial motion. As free-ranging as biological solutions to invasive species, just point out that I believe that Councillor Dr. Raze, you're talking about the folly of humanity, I believe, rather than something specifically related to humans. I understand that gene editing will take place of biological solutions to invasive species in the future. And I hope it does soon, because we have all of our lives seen the way that we have treated invasive species, and it's been callous and cold. And I think none of us have grown up in Tasmania don't remember spending time in the forest and the bush and seeing animals with mixed mitosis suffering horribly. So we hope that there is a better solution soon. But in between, I think we should pass this motion today and bring some small relief to our veterinary practices in the LGA.
Thanks, Councillor Dawkins. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors at the table. Carried 11-0. The motion is carried. At 2:13, we're going to have a 5-minute break. Thank you. We'll return at 2:18. And at 2:18, we are back on air and the meeting is reconvened. We note that Councillor Kai is back and Councillor Walker has not yet made his way back to the table. So let's continue with the meeting. We're at item 14, page number 60, item 14.1, Tender Review Committee meeting of the 20th of April. It's moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Harris. Councillor Mackenzie, over to you.
Yeah, I just want to make a note because I think this is a really good case of where an item was brought to the Tender Review Committee which was out of budget. It was over budget in relation to the amount that was put forward by the tenderer, and the officers went away and worked a way around it where they could sit there and say, we can get this tender price back to a level where we can cope within the budget by actually the City of Launceston actually taking on some of the work and activities to actually make it come in budget. So I think that's a really proactive way of managing something which wasn't working in relation to it, and we can still go ahead with the Tenzing Park. It's great because it was all designed around community input, and I think the outcome that we got was really good.
Thanks, Councillor Mackenzie. Seconder, Councillor Harris.
Only to say I'm sure the residents of St Leonard's will be very pleased when this play space has been created there in Tenzing Park, because there have been many comments made on the St Leonard's Facebook group about, we need more community facilities. And of course, St Leonard's is a growth area for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other contributions? 14.1. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to say anything further? We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? That's all councillors at the table. The motion is carried 11-0. Item 14.2, Cultural Advisory Committee meeting held on the 5th of April to receive a report from the meeting of the 5th of April. Someone to move? Councillor Britton, a seconder. Thanks, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Britton.
Thank you very much, Mayor. We welcomed Abby McDonald and Amanda Shepherd to the committee, and we are still in the process of discussing and prioritising the public art strategy and the budget for that strategy in more to come. So, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. Seconder, Councillor Dawkins. Any other contributions? Councillor Britton, anything you failed to say? No. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. Councillor Walker returns with a coffee at 2:21. The motion is carried 12-0. 15.1, Albert Hall Renewal Project. Mr Dickinson, did you wish to speak further with regard to 15.1? You don't get to ask questions, but you're entitled to speak for 2 minutes if you wish.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. It's been an ongoing, most councillors would know, half of the people from the previous council and the balance now would know I've been greatly involved in this for the best part of a year now, during the design stage of it. And all of this is in writing, in text and whatever, and it's not just verbal, with council officers. When it eventually got to the tender period, put it quaintly, I just said to myself, stuff it. I've done what I can as far as the design and the basic approach goes. I made very little headway, so now it's going ahead. Tender documents have been prepared. That's it, Jim. You're out of it. Whoops, you're out of it. Except I'm not, because the project became very, very unwieldy, sort of clumsy, and the current report basically says it's unachievable. It says that quite clearly. It's unachievable for the $11 million. So my questions in public question time was basically, you need to rethink it. The demolition of the existing east wing is totally irrational. If that was left, you can make the existing foyer double the size quite easily. That's going to cost nowhere near $11 million, and all the balance of the monies can go towards whatever else is needed in the proposed upgrade of the Albert Hall. And a convention centre has been mentioned, one use that it can be put to, but the longer the Albert Hall doesn't get finalised or completed, yes. Thank you very much. I think I made my point. Thank you.
Thank you, and it is appreciated. Are there any other contributions to 15.1? So, councillors are asked to receive the project update, warts and all. They're my words, not in the recommendation. Council receives the project update for the Albert Hall renewal project. Someone to move receiving of the report, Councillor Mackenzie. A seconder for receiving the report, Councillor Harris. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. And look, I'll just start off with some comments. I mean, this was a great project that started out on the back of a $10 million grant from the Australian government to enable us to bring our old lady back into spec in relation to lots of things that were not working within the current fabric of the hall, but it also gave us an opportunity to really look and say, what else could this be with that sort of money? We embarked on this project 3-4 years ago, I guess probably just pre-COVID, in relation to the conversations in regards to where this might go. We've gone out and done some architectural drawings to come up with a design that changes what the park does, the configuration of how the Albert Hall works, particularly about the restaurant separating that from the rest of the Albert Hall, because currently there's only one kitchen. So there's lots of things that have been looked at over the period of the time. Unfortunately, a little thing called COVID came along in the middle of all of it. And as we all know, what that's done to pricing and the pressures that have been put on the contracting industry in and around Tasmania in particular. And in this particular project, because it is an Australian government-funded project, there are a number of issues associated with who can actually do the build. They need to have, they need to be actually regulated, or they need to be, not sure, credentialed, I think the right word, by Australian government. And there's only, I think, 3 builders in the state that can actually do that. At the time of going to tender, we found that those parties weren't in a position where they could do it, and we've ended up with a company from Victoria. So we've had to come up with a basis where we've employed them to do a particular job with the ability potentially to then take it out to the build going forward. As has been eminently put out in the report, the cost associated with what we plan to do and what we're now going to be able to do don't fit within the $10 million bracket. So we're faced with a conversation further about whether we want to commit $4 or $5 million extra to make this project happen. I'll make the comment, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We've got $10 million. It will not get any cheaper if we leave it to another day. The question is, do we want to do anything about it at all? Mr Dickinson has proffered that we just tart up what we've got and move on with it. That's an option, clearly, and that may be one that we actually discuss when we get further into this matter. I think that would be a pity on the basis that we spent a lot of time and effort to come up with something, and I know not everybody agrees with what the design looks like and some of the issues associated with it, but I think a pretty impressive design that actually speaks to the park, and that's what it was designed to do, and actually bring City Park and the Albert Hall, but still leave our old lady looking brilliant and standing there in its finest thing, but being more functional for our community. I think this is great that this report's come at this time, because I guess a lot of people have seen and driven past the Albert Hall and the doors have been closed and saying, why is it closed? So this gives everybody an update on some of the processes that have gone on, and they aren't easy, and I congratulate CPD for the work that they've done to keep bringing back ideas and how we're doing those things, reshaping, looking at how we actually deliver on the project. And again, the old story about doing it cheaper and easier, that's a good conversation to have, but I've seen things that have been done cheaper and ultimately they don't last and they don't look great into the future. So we need to make sure that if we're actually going to do something with this building, we do it right, because this is the only chance we're going to get to do it. So we're going to be faced with, once we come back to discuss this further, with a fairly big decision about what we want to do in regards to our future direction for this. But out of the project, hopefully we'll still end up with getting the stage 1 and 2 projects done, which is actually looking at the actual hall itself, which is doing accessibility issues, acoustics, heating, a whole host of things which will actually make the hall more functional in itself. So there's been some really good work that's come out of this. So whatever we've done to date hasn't been wasted because we've actually got a lot of really good intel on how to make the Albert Hall function better in its current guise at the moment. So I think there's some really good things in there. It talks about, the other part of the report goes on to talk about management, and I'm delighted that Theatre North has been mentioned in there as a potential manager of the site, but I think it's a bit premature to have got to that because, yes, we're interested in having a conversation at Theatre North, but there has been no real detailed conversations in regard to it. So I wouldn't like the community to think this is a fait accompli that Theatre North is going to do this because there's still a lot of discussions to go in relation to it. There is a management model to be looked through at some future stage in regards to how we look at it going forward. This is a building that has always cost council money in relation to dollars that it goes out of the pocket. It's also always added value to the community of Launceston for the things that have gone on inside it. So we need to balance what that is and what is the best model that we can actually come up with to ensure that the management of that into the future goes further. I don't need to say anything further, so I'll sit down.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Councillor Harris is the seconder.
Thank you. Like Councillor Mackenzie, I think this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us as a council. The initial grant was $10 million, and a further $1 million was added under, I think, a Building Better Regions funding or something, or roads to recovery. So we have $11 million of federal funds. However, the total cost to make a significant change and improvement to the Albert Hall to meet the needs of the current needs for us as a city and going forward is probably somewhere in the order of 15 to 16 million. So we're going to have to put our hand in the pocket, and it is our building. If we took $3 or $4 million and tried to build something similar, we would certainly not have anything of the size or the scale or of the grandeur of what is the Albert Hall. So I think it is very, whilst it's only a report to tell us what's happening, I support in general principle the concept that we look at what funding council will put towards this, because certainly the federal government have been generous in what they've offered us, and I think it's something that we as a council need to be proud of, that we can look back and say, yes, this is now the revised, the upgraded Albert Hall, and it will be fit for purpose for the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's important, as to what Councillor Harris said just then, fit for purpose going forward into the future, that the primary focus of this hall is to be used and utilised. We've done a plethora of community consultation. It's come back, foyer, PA, change rooms. It's all addressed into this report, which we'll be accepting here today. But yeah, the focus for it is we've got the funding. It's a building that, whilst it costs us money, it's something that potentially hasn't really been invested heavily into over its lifetime. So for me personally, to think about the investment and the ability to give back to our community through the utilisation of the actual hall itself, the business models, the management models, we've had extensive conversations around it, which is all positive. The nuts and bolts of it get down to how much those nuts and bolts cost. That will come through a different channel, different conversations, workshops, and through to it. But I'm excited to see what community engagement and community outreach that this hall can give, not only for us, but professionally, applying for venues, whether it's managed by a Theatre North model, but the programming that's already done in this community is really quite sensational, and it's heavily supported and looked at by our community. So I look forward to seeing what we do forward, and I would be supporting everything that goes into this out of pocket.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Any other contributions? A question, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, a couple of questions. First of all, does accepting this report today mean that council administrators will begin to make adjustments and calculations in the coming budget in order to facilitate the extra money that would be needed to complete this task?
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Clarifying question from Councillor Walker. General Manager Shane.
So, obviously, there's no decision being made today, clearly. And I've outlined in the report the next steps, which is continuing along looking at the management model. We're continuing to work with SHAPE to refine the price. Once we've got that, that'll come back to council for a discussion. And it's at that point then we will consider, well, how and if we fund it.
Thanks, General Manager. Councillor Walker.
So would that come back in the form of a budget adjustment, or would that come back in the form of an additional report?
General Manager.
Well, I guess we would come back to a workshop first to get a feel for where we need to head. I guess there's two processes. There's one, say we were to get to a successful result with the current contractor. We would need a decision from council to appoint that contractor. We're at that time of year now where we're considering budget, so the additional funds would probably be picked up in the budget process, which we normally approve in June. If that process wasn't continued, we would have to come back and outline an alternative process, which would need a council decision.
Thanks. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. What are the limits in terms of, I suppose, chronology or, commencement dates and things like that that are applied with this grant? Considering that there is a $10 million grant plus a separate $1 million grant, whether they are, co-joined the same or whether they have different stipulations?
Thanks, Councillor Walker. General Manager.
So the $1 million grant is on a shorter time frame. I guess it's our intent to move that to do the hall works so we can spend that money, which I don't think there's any disagreement. The hall works need to be done. The $10 million has a completion date of about July 24. Often with these grant things, they're not fixed and there's room for negotiation given the challenges we've had, but we would still like to work to a July 24 completion.
Another question.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may, what we don't seem to have is a cost-benefit analysis of putting in an extra between $4 to $6.4 million or whatever between $4 and $6 million into this project. Do you consider that there's scope, or will that cost-benefit analysis be done as part of the next stage in this process? Because or do you think that this is adequate as it stands?
Thanks, Councillor Walker. General Manager.
I'm going to say whether council need a cost-benefit analysis, a formal cost-benefit analysis to make a decision, that's the choice council get. I'm going to say it wasn't my intent to do that at this stage. I'm going to say that will take months and many tens of thousands of dollars, and at this stage I didn't feel that was valuable. But if council feel that that's what they need to make a decision, then happy to discuss that further.
Thanks, General Manager. Another question. Happy? Yep. Any further questions? Speaking or question, Councillor Raze?
I'll ask a question.
Sure. Councillor Raze, question.
I think we all agree that Albert Hall is an iconic building, more than 150 years. We are actually fortunate to have it, and that we should actually need upgrading. It has major use by our communities, but we are constrained about the funding. I would like perhaps we need to explain to our community, why do we need to spend $4.1 million from taxpayer money to put it in the building, and we have to justify that? My question will be, can we have the necessary changes with the resources we have got at the moment and leave the rest when we have more extra funding, rather than ask the community to pay for that? Because there has been recent concern from the community how the rate had been increased, and so many people actually cannot afford it. And I feel we have to justify how we can find money for building renovation while we are increasing the rate as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dr. Raze. General Manager Shane.
Look, I'm going to say we've got a current grant for $10 million that requires us to do certain works. That money's not covering the works, clearly. So whether there's an opportunity to use that $10 million for something else, I don't know without negotiation with the federal government. There is a choice not to spend any money. There's a choice to spend council's money to do necessary stuff and give the grant money back on us. So that's all options, and that's council's choice. But what I would say is that we started off with a set of objectives that we wanted to achieve with the project, and we've worked through those objectives. Unfortunately, construction costs have gone up, but we got to a point where what we're proposing at the moment in terms of design is meeting the objectives that we initially set. So if we're not to do the project, if to redirect the funding, I guess we're also not going to achieve those objectives, which is fine, but that's a decision of council.
CO, point of clarity with regard to our proposed budget increase and the scope of the work.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So the cash position of the council is that we are able to provide the additional funding into this project with the current recommended rate increase that the council will consider in the next item.
Thanks, CO. Any further questions or contributions? Councillor Walker to speak, or
thank you, sir. To speak, thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
And you might have inferred from my line of questioning that I do have concerns about allocating such a large amount of money without a cost-benefit analysis. I think most people here are aware of the history of how we've come to this point, and the grants that has been given. And an effort for the council to find the best way to proceed. Now, I fully accept that there are factors outside our control in terms of inflation, a changing economy, a changing marketplace, but they're also things that we have to therefore make allowances for. It's a difficult situation that we find ourselves in. We're being asked to allocate $5 million, not specifically through this report. And I do really thank the officer for the report. I think it's thorough. I think it gives everyone in Launceston a really clear picture of where we're at, how we arrived there. And I don't, point the finger at anyone. I'm part of that process. I did struggle to vote to support the process, but I did vote to support this process. And that was because I think it was rigorous, and we got to a point where I was satisfied that as a previous councillor referred to the old girl, well, I think it might have been misgendered because it's the Albert Hall. We call it the old boy, perhaps. But nonetheless, it's a very much, loved and, recognised, famous, especially at the time it was built, one of the largest of its type in the world. And so I certainly don't point the finger at where we got to. And I appreciate the work of Mr Dickinson and others who have, also put their contributions in, because I think what everyone wants is the best outcome. What everyone wants is a superlative outcome, something that does that hall proud. Because of course the hall, if you look at the reasons why it was built and the way that it was built, no expense was spared. Now, we can't do that because we know that it would probably be a lot more than $16 million if no expense was spared. We're now in a situation where, does accepting this report mean that essentially we are now going down that path of budget allocation, reallocation, without a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis? I use the comparison with a recent motion I put forward where council could express an interest in the Patterson Barracks that the federal government via the Defence Force will be disposing of at some point. And of course, and rightly so, we will be doing a thorough business analysis, cost-benefit analysis of that decision before we venture forth, noting that it will cost council money to do that, regardless of the purchase price and regardless of its use, it will cost council money. Similar here. Now, we know that there are interested parties. We know that there are potential uses for this site, but we don't know whether the extra money that we spend will represent extra use. We may find in 2 years' time, when all of this is done, if we are to proceed down this path, that the building is used much the same as it was used previously. Now, that's not necessarily a reason not to do it, but I suppose what I'm working up to is a point where, and it has been suggested at this table already, that we might consider working within our means, working within the budget that we have, and achieving what we can, noting that there may be a second part to that process that may be 5 years away. Now, we would all love to spend a lot of money on a lot of different things at this time, but it is the wrong time to be doing that. It is the wrong time for this council to be doing that when we are seeking a modest, but in this time, a significant rate rise. I worked it out for myself. It's only an extra $50 a week if and when we get to potential rate rises. It's not in this council meeting, but soon to be done. But it all adds up. This is a time where we are asking the people of Launceston, and yes, the money there is available if we wish to spend it, but we're asking to spend at a time when people are going to be doing it tough. People already are doing it tough, as we know. That's not going to change. We are in uncharted territory when it comes to that. We think in terms of endless prosperity and growth. They're great things, but we are in a time. I'd like some extra time, if I may, Mayor.
Someone to move. Councillor Walker be granted an extension. Moved Councillor Pentridge, seconded Councillor Kai. All those in favour raise their hand. That's all councillors present. Carried.
You never know if I'm allowed to vote for myself when it comes to getting extra time, but I better not waste any more. Let me just say that we do all want a superlative outcome. I would like to speak to the federal government, of the council, or the mayor and the CEO on behalf of council, to speak to the federal government to understand what our options are further when it comes to a potential reworking of the $11 million that we do have to spend. We are in uncharted waters. Talking about meeting the needs of the city, we don't know what those needs are. We do know that there are potential uses for a refurbished hall, and that's great. And that may well come to fruition. But I don't think I'd be alone in saying this is probably not the biggest priority for this council at the moment, regardless of the fact that we are fiscally responsible organisation that does have the $5 million available. That's a great thing. In Launceston, people should be proud of the fact that this council is in that position. That's a great thing, but that doesn't mean that this is the right time to spend that extra money. I know that we have come to this point, we have arrived here, but I'm firmly of the belief that we should work within those means, find a way to spend that $11 million. And my only confusion is, in accepting this report, am I tacitly accepting that we're going down a path of seeking to spend more money and conclude what all that we began when we started? So that is ending on a question. If someone is happy to address that, thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. You did ask it previously, but just to reiterate, CEO.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So I think the report concludes with a range of next steps, which within that is options, and probably for what you're talking to, it's the second dot point that's most pertinent, which it says on completion of the value management process, but on completion of the process, consider whether to accept the price, whether to re-tender works, consider value for money and construction, considering value for money and construction market risk. So it doesn't provide tacit approval. What it does is accept that there's options that the council will be considering, and those are probably the most pertinent to your concern.
Any other contributions? Any other questions? Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to close?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks, everybody, for their contribution. I think the most important thing about this is that this is not the end of the process. This is still in the middle of the process, and we've still got conversations to have. So hopefully the feedback that's been given today by everybody will take on board. So when we come back, we can have a really finite conversation about where we want to go with this project. To me, it's a matter of, do we wish to sit out there and make this lovely man something different to what it is today, or whether we wish to sort of say, no, we've got other priorities that we want to do it. I guess one of the other things I wouldn't mind doing is also, as part of that process, is just going back and going through the conditions of the $10 million grant and saying, can we spend X amount on this and then give you half of it back? Or do we have to spend the lot or bust? Because that gives us a different conversation, because there are things that we need to do in the hall now that if all of a sudden the grant's taken away and we have to do it ourselves because we're not doing the other works, then that will create some angst, and we'll probably still end up spending a significant part of that $4 or $5 million making the hall better than it is. But I won't require that answer now, but I think that's something when we go back into discussions that we need to sort of just to tease out to make sure that we give the money back, and we've still got to spend most of the money anyway. So anyway, I think a good conversation. I think the most important thing is what we're doing is we've come back to the community and we've given them information about where the project's at. And noting that there are some significant issues that we as councillors need to discuss further. We'll get advice in regards to that, but then we need to make a decision about where we want to go to next.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. So we'll put the motion to the vote with regard to receiving this project update. All those in favour raise their hand. Those against? 2 councillors are against receiving a report. That is Councillor Walker and Councillor Pentridge. The remainder are in favour. 10-2, the motion is carried. Thank you. Item 16, Organisational Services Network. 16.1, the proposed 2023-2024 annual plan and statutory estimates. The recommendation here is that we approve the release of the draft annual plan and the proposed estimates, including the capital projects and the major operational projects, that we invite submissions from the community, and with regard to those, that we determine to close the submissions on Sunday the 14th of May, that we note that the submissions will be discussed at a workshop on the 25th of May, that we note the council meeting, at the council meeting of the 29th of June, it's the intended date at which the council will be asked to consider the adoption of the annual plan, the estimates and the rating resolution for 2023-2024. There are no speakers. Someone to move the item. Thank you, Councillor Harris. Seconded, Councillor Walker. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, this is an item to us to release the annual plan for community consultation. The opportunity for consultation is short. It finishes on Sunday the 14th of May, and here we are on the 4th of May, so just 10 days. However, previous budgets tend to get very few comments or consultation back, I guess you'd say. Submissions is the word I was looking for, submissions back. So I do encourage anyone listening to have a good read. It does set a rate of 4.5% increase. Unlike what Councillor Walker said, that isn't a $50 a week increase. If you pay $2,000 a year rates, and I think that's about our average rate in Launceston, it is in fact a $90 a year increase. So more like $2 a week rather than $50 a week. But it is something that is much less than the Consumer Price Index of 7.7%. But having said that, the wages growth in this state, and in fact the whole country, is considerably less than 7.7%. So in effect, we are going backwards. It is something that we as an organisation get one opportunity only to set our prices for the next 12 months. Unlike a business who may review their prices every quarter or every 6 months and adjust them up if that's what's necessary to increase their, keep their margins or to keep their business profitable, we have to make an assessment of what our costs will be and have to set it with 12 months, and the rates are set at that. So I do congratulate those who have put this report together. I know it is something that is ongoing throughout the whole year. It's a bit like painting the Sydney Harbour Bridge. They no sooner get to one end of it and they get the budget out and they are starting on the next year's report. So it is something that is very important, but we are a very well managed, a financially managed council with a long-term financial plan. Therefore, everything that's on there, and I won't go through any items and someone may choose to question or otherwise, but it is there for community consultation. Come back to us. We won't be setting the rate until the meeting of the 29th of June. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Seconder, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. And if I may just first address, if I did say, as through you, Mayor, to Councillor Harris, if I did say $50 a week, I certainly didn't mean that. I meant $50 a year. That's what I said in my mind. If that record could be corrected, I was making the point that it is a reasonably modest rate increase. Well, we're not talking about rate increases today. We're talking about fees and charges. And likewise, that is a reasonably modest increase, as it should be in these times, and I shouldn't have to reiterate that. I'm sure everyone agrees with me in regards to that. And I do also congratulate our council, the administrators and the officers who especially work in this area for their diligence in doing that. I do also encourage people, and a bit disappointed that it's only 10 days. People have to look at the changes, because there are some small anomalies when it comes to some of the charge rises, but generally it is modest. It is below the rate of inflation, so it is clear to the community that council is doing what it can to keep those at a minimum. We all understand, feel, experience and see the impact of inflation in our community at the moment. Some people are in a difficult position, as I spoke to earlier today, not in this meeting but in another, food security. A third of people suffering food security issues are people on a mortgage at the moment. That gives you an idea of what is happening in our community, and I'm sure there are many, many other examples. And people will do what they can to pay their bills, to put food on the table and to keep their lives moving forward. But we are in a difficult time, and I sincerely recognise the work that council is doing, and when we compare it to other councils around our state, the work that this council is doing to keep a lid on that process. So I do encourage people to make submissions, to jump online and have a look at the fees and charges. And I also ask if there is any way for us to extend that period in which the community can make comment. Then I would certainly be supportive of that. It may not be possible, so you have until the 14th, is it, where we in which to make that decision, to contribute to what you see in front of you. But certainly make yourselves aware of that if you have that opportunity and if you have those concerns, and let us know about it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. I will answer your question with regard to the timeframes. CEO, a question with regard to the ability to extend the public submission contributions.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So it's been structured around agenda preparation times more so than anything. I mean, if we were to receive submissions prior to the workshop on the 25th and after the 14th, we certainly wouldn't. We would certainly consider them. But that would be the yes.
Great. So CEO's advised that process-wise, they could indeed be considered up until the 24th of May, but in order for there to be some structure and some, kind of system, that formally we'll have an advertising period until the 14th of May, but additional ones will still come to councillors for consideration, correct? Are there any other contributions? Councillor Dawkins.
Just briefly, just looking at the amount of the fields, we've got 870 fields in this fees and charges spreadsheet. That just goes to show how much work this council does. People, we often hear...
Councillor Dawkins, can I just get you to pause on that one just until we come to 16.2? Is that all right?
Of course.
Yeah. It's all linked, but we'll come to 16.2 in a minute. Anything else? Councillor Mackenzie.
I'll be very quick because I'm leaving in about 2 minutes. But I just felt, I'd like just to acknowledge the amount of work the Examiner do in reporting all the things that we're actually talking about in the paper before we actually speak about it. So thank you very much for that, Alison. But I just do want to take exception to the 4.5% rate hike. I don't see it quite as a hike in the context of what's going on in the community at the moment. I think the thing that often happens is Launceston is the leader when it comes to setting rates. Everybody follows after we've been out to market. But certainly in conversations I had a couple of weeks ago, I think other councils in and around the region are going to be looking at numbers significantly higher than 4.5%. Not to say that that's not a high figure for people who are in financial distress. It is a challenging thing for us to get the budget mix right to ensure that we're delivering the programs and the services that our ratepayers wish for and aspire to, being Australia's leading regional city. And so I think it's important that we do it. And I think there's a great balance. And I note that we've been through 3 levels of workshops before we've got to this place today, where we've talked about lots of different things that make up the budget and what we're actually looking to spend our money on over the next 12 months. So I think it's important that we take that in context. This is being done year in, year out, and I think for the whole 11 years that I've been on council, I've heard about people who've complained about our rates all for but 1 year. And that was in 2019 when we didn't put it up at all. 2020 we didn't put it up all because of COVID. So the reality is I don't think it matters whether we're 2%, 4%, 7%, people are still going to be unhappy with whatever that number looks like. Ours is to reach a balance of what's fair and reasonable for our community to ensure that we continue to make this the most livable community that we can make. And there is a breadth of things that we actually do across this community. Once we were rates, roads and rubbish, and some people think we still are that, but we're a much more diverse organisation of that. There's been a push down of services that we provide that used to be provided by state and federal governments, which we have now, they've given us a dollar here and a dollar there on a capital program and then said, it's all yours from there. So the reality of it is we are a huge community project-based things like our support of the arts through sponsorships and things like that for events are very important to this city, and it's what makes this city what it is. I'm very pleased that we can actually come in as low as 4.5% with the huge escalation in rates of rate of inflation in the last month or two. So I'm take my hat off to the officers to be able to come in, because I think that is a reasonable rate increase, not a rate hike, that we're actually putting to our community. It will be uncomfortable for some, I have no doubt about that, and I feel very sorry, but we do have opportunities for people to talk to us about how they may be able to manage those rate stresses as we go through our hardship policies and so forth like that. So I commend the community to look at the budget and to make any comments they wish to make in relation to it, because at the margin we can always find something we'd prefer to do or prefer not to do, but that's just a matter of taste often in some of those sorts of things. What I don't see here is a big wasteful budget.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie, and we'll note you departing the meeting at 3:01. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Harris, Councillor Pentridge.
On a personal note, I think we should wish our friend a happy holiday.
Thank you,
and come back safely.
Councillor Pentridge, good. That's nice. Councillor Harris, do you wish to close?
Yes, just to close, and whilst we will be getting on the fees and charges in a moment, it is interesting to note that over $16 million of our budget is in fact renewal of capital projects. A further $2.3 million is upgrading of existing, and just under $2 million is actually additional infrastructure that we are spending capital money on. So it is, we are a large organisation. We do have a lot of assets, and those assets must be renewed. And we have to, and the way we get that is through our rates. In addition to those assets, we also have a bit of a once-off $2 million, or nearly $2 million IT cost on the replacement of our corporate information system. So this is an interesting budget, for people to have a look at. We will get onto the charges and things on as our next item, but I hope that everyone will support us in this one today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried 11-0 and is carried. Now move to 16.2. Councillor Dawkins, do you wish to move fees and charges? Yes. Acting General Manager Leanne will speak to us with regard to Councillor Dawkins' notice of motion and its impact on the budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like councillors to note that the item passed through the notice of motion has been included in the unamended recommendation for item 16.2. So that's a zero-line item for waste disposal for vets in the municipality.
Thank you, Acting General Manager. Moved Councillor Dawkins, a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Dawkins, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, apologies for before I slipped through a page and got them all joined up. Yeah, so going back to that, so the 870 fields, it just goes to show the breadth of the work that we do. It outlines how council's financial management has evolved because we add and we modify fees as we realise that we need to. We can use a fee to attempt to suppress a behaviour, and we can reduce a fee in order to enable a behaviour. And so I think there's actually a lot more to the fees and charges than is a simple spreadsheet. And I note that those kinds of tools are used by financial managers and have to be used. So there are modest increases, as have been noted, due to our understanding of our community needs. I think, you know, if you think about it, whether it's a museum entrance or end-of-life decisions around how somebody wants to be laid to rest or cremated and some commemoration of their life, there's so much to how a person would be born, live their life, and then move through to the later stages. It's all laid out here in our fees and charges. We never look to impose a fee that's greater than we believe our community can offer. We're not part of that capitalist market system in that sense. We have to be able to modify these fees and charges as are required and as are noted by the entire work of council. So I appreciate the breadth of work and the depth of work that's done here, and I hope that community members look deeply at this list and understand that we use these fees in order to be able to support the community and supply the services that this city does.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Seconder, Councillor Harris.
Only to reinforce what Councillor Dawkins said, that I'm just looking through them all now, and there are fees, I guess, and it just goes to show how many areas we do operate in, whether it's out at the crematorium or whether it's parking or whether it's a higher fee for the York Park, or even the fact that we have $1 for a slide down the slide up at the swimming centre to use the slide. So it is complete, and I guess we are setting that based on our previous conversation about the 4.5% rate rise, because obviously these fees are part of it. Some of them have gone up, but most of them have gone up by a minimum amount, and many have not changed. And there is a lot to be recommended that council doesn't always just put them up, and but many have had to go up. It's just part of what we're got to do, because if you suppress the rise for 1 year, you eventually will have to catch that back up. And it is important that council continually monitors it, and actually you are being kinder to your ratepayers to slowly increase them than it is to have a big jump, because you suppress them for a year or two or three without, for no good reason, because you will then have to catch up. So I do think that we act in a very responsible way, and once again, the council officers are to be congratulated, because if a small increase doesn't equal a full $1, doesn't equal a full 10 cents on your parking meter, then they don't put it up by 5 cents. They do hold it till it becomes a nice round figure to make it a little easier for us, but it is still something that people will recognise. Once we get there, that there's going to be some increases, but it is what we need to do as an organisation. With that, I'll say thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Question, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, if I may. Mayor, a question to Officer Nathan. I would imagine, just in regards to the perennial issue of waste management fees, I note that we are saying that the cost of roadside collection have increased up to 14%. I think we're not passing that full amount on, perhaps. Maybe we are. And likewise, the state government has introduced the landfill levy, which will have an impact on the tonnage rate at the tip face. This is probably the one area in the fees and charges where there is more of a significant increase. I'm just wondering whether the officer would agree with that statement and explain a little bit more about the waste levy changes, noting that there are quite a number of other charges associated with waste, and are all of them being impacted in a similar way?
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Nathan, Manager of Finance.
Thanks for the question. Councillor Walker, so with the waste management charge, that is passed on via the rates notice. So there's a waste management charge that each property owner in the municipality will receive. That depends on the size of their bin that they have. We've allocated the cost accordingly. It is done on a cost recovery basis, so council aims to be cost neutral with regards to the curbside collection contract. That includes FOGO, waste and recycling, and we look to, as I said, be neutral with that. So those costs are passed on to residents in the municipality, businesses and other property owners. It is around about that 14% increase. With regards to the state government levy, that's currently billed at $21.36 a tonne with some indexation applied. We've calculated the average tonnage per property in the municipality, and that will be passed on via the rates notice as well. That's $10.50 that each rate notice will have on it. We're just collecting that on behalf of the state government and then passing it on, very similar to the fire services levy. A number of other waste costs have increased in the fees and charges. There's many reasons behind that. A lot of them are quite similar to the waste management charge increases, but also the new sustainable pricing model as well that councillors were briefed on at a workshop recently.
Thanks so much, Nathan. Any further questions, Councillor Walker? Any other? Yeah, you'd like to speak, Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to speak. Yeah, similar to our annual plan and the rates increase. You know, the average sort of around 3% increase of these particular items is, you know, again, something to be, I think, commended for this council. There are some other issues, like I just, you know, raised that question with waste, that are out of our control. We don't get to decide that. I suppose we do get, you know, the opportunity to find new ways, new uses, new ways of generating even income from things like that. For example, with the organics and the potential in the future to be able to use, or well, as council already does use, the compost, you know, for its own purposes. So there are benefits in that new system, but until we can weigh each individual bin on the side of the street, those benefits may or may not flow to the individual. And it's a collective issue that we face there. Certainly, when it comes to what's listed here, one thing I suppose I would like to see, and I'm sure I would be able to get access to that, and hopefully the public can too, the listing here has the 23-24 proposed fee, but it doesn't have the previous fee in the agenda that people could compare it to easily. So that might be something that people can access online, perhaps. I'll end on a question and just say, you know, that would be one thing that I would have preferred to have seen there anyway.
So, notwithstanding that the fees and charges aren't going out for public consultation, is a reminder that, of course, today we're setting the fees and charges. So, notwithstanding that that's seen as important by Councillor Walker, is there an opportunity, if any member of the public wanted to see in dollar terms the old fee price, where would they access that?
They are currently on our website until 30 June for this financial year.
Great, thank you. Any further question?
Well, no, apologies, Mayor. I presume that it was part of the annual plan and therefore it was part of that consultation process.
So just in terms of process, Acting General Manager or Manager of Finance, can you just relay the process of why we set the fees and charges and put the rate out for consultation?
Certainly. So the reason we set the fees and charges at this juncture is that's a key component of actually working through what our budget will be for next financial year. So that gives us budget certainty. As Councillor Dawkins remarked, I think there's 700 or 800 individual lines, so we need that certainty for preparing the budget for next year. So if we're going into 29th of June workshop and we don't have clarity on what the fees will be, that makes it almost impossible to set that budget. Having said that, there's the opportunity throughout the year to change any of these fees. Council has that power.
Thank you. Of course, we have done that in the past. Any other speakers to 16.2, fees and charges? Councillor Dawkins, do you wish to close? We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour raise their hand. That is all councillors present. The motion is carried 11-0. Thank you to our staff for the huge amount of work that has got us to that point. Item 17, CEO Officer Network. 17.1, UNESCO City of Gastronomy funding request. Recommendation listed there. The council approves the request for the City of Gastronomy. Someone to move? Thanks, Councillor Britton. Seconder, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Britton, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor. I'm a bit of a foodie myself, and I think it's fantastic that Launceston has achieved this. One thing in particular that I like about it, sorry, I'm probably going a bit too specific here, but ultimately it's what they want to do about creating a gateway to using the airport to create a gateway to the City of Gastronomy. Indeed, I've heard the airport be called before. It is the gateway to the north. I'm pretty passionate about Launceston. I think everyone here is. Hobart's got a lot of ticks against its box, and this is just a huge one for Launceston. I hope it's quite unanimous that we do want to support this, but I think we'd be silly not to, and continuing on in the future, it can be a really great thing for Launceston. We're lucky that we've got it. We do have the resources, the food, the agriculture to sustain it. And yeah, when I first heard that we actually got it, I wasn't aware we were even going. I was overwhelmed. It's fantastic. My full support with this, you will do, continuing on into the future, and I hope everyone else does. So, yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. Seconder, Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. Under the chair of the incredible Jane Bennett, I think they've been able to take City of Gastronomy to the next level here. We're here today to discuss an increase to $37,500 for the next financial year, which I think we can all agree is a considerable amount of money. And I guess my only caution would be that I think we need to set a cap for what we're prepared as a council. We're not the only council who are contributing to this fund. The whole region, of course, have their own budget asks and will have their own debates around how they're going to continue to fund this organisation. I've been very fortunate to be involved with many of the events from the City of Gastronomy, and they are exceptional. It is the offering, I think we forget sometimes just how incredible this part of the world is. You know, that listening to winemakers, and I've probably said this before, but there's one moment where a winemaker said he got off a plane, he'd come here from one of the warmer wine-growing regions, and he smelt the air and he knew immediately it's where he had to grow grapes. This is the kind of place that we live in, and I don't know that there are many others. The cool climate, the way that a cool climate slows down the way that plant life grows and expands the flavours is just something that I think we miss. We know when a piece of food hasn't been grown properly because it looks like the thing, but it doesn't taste like it. Food, when grown properly, tastes exactly the way it's supposed to, and that's what we can learn and go back to those really important fundamentals of food with an organisation like this. The global network that's set up through this designation, the social prosperity around being able to tell the story of our food, the cultural prosperity, where we get to share those stories and share the unique offerings of a place like this region in Tasmania. But for me, we need to keep hammering home how important it is that a sustainable environment is the only way we can sustain a food network. That plus we remember that we live in an LGA where we have an incredibly high number of people who are living in low socioeconomic communities. And those vulnerable people also need to be covered by this designation. They've known from the start, the board have known from the start that they have to include food security. And I think they've demonstrated in the ensuing years that they've understood that, and they've reached those tendrils into community to ensure that we're speaking to the people we need to, because it's wonderful for us to go to harvest and it's beautiful for us to go to restaurants and spend our hard-earned money in ways that other people could never imagine. So whilst this group are considering the more vulnerable members of the community, as well as telling the incredible narrative around agritourism and food, I believe it should be supported.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Are there any other contributions? Councillor Dr. Raze.
I'm quite, I support specifically that strategic intent in this document, because I feel like actually this is the way how we can promote healthy living. And in particular, how education is very relevant. And the Councilor, it seems like it is supporting providing education campaign, particularly like gardening, community gardening, and also the importance of raising awareness of children and bringing up cooking skill as part of the school curriculum. I think it's an important thing to promote in the future, as well as supporting and advocating for lunch program, because I feel if we want to promote healthy community, we should start at a young age as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Raze. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do congratulate, the work that has gone in over the past couple of decades, but that recognition, I think we do take it for granted. We are a food bowl, not just of the north, but I remember as Adam Lior, who came down and spoke at the agriculture event last year, was saying nationally recognised food centre, food and wine, beverage. So the council should support these things. And I know that our support has been, I suppose you would say, reasonably modest in the past, but it's appropriate that it does increase. It's appropriate that it does link into all the other initiatives, including, as Councillor Dawkins, through you, Mayor, said, included in regards to food security and things like that, and that we grow that recognition, but that we grow that opportunity. It's, it then leads into tourism, into business, small and large, into community benefits and security of food, and just goes in so many directions. We may not be the capital of Tasmania, but we're the capital of the north, and we're the capital of agriculture and of gastronomy. People have recognised that they've seized that opportunity, and we're just at the beginning of that process now. What they've achieved so far with their fermentation centre and things like that, and getting support from other areas, so we should be supporting. Of course, we want to see how that support has an effect and a tangible benefit, and we are already seeing that. So, I commend the recommendation. The one thing I would say is I did find, and this is probably more of a semantic note, the recommendation itself confused me somewhat, that we are recommending I'd have to read it to be clear, but the recommendation made me feel as though we were actually recommending the increase, whereas I suppose what we are recommending essentially is that they are able to apply for that increased amount. And I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong about that, but there is an application process that goes with it.
Some clarity with regard to the descriptor?
Mr Mayor. No, so the council has made decisions in the last 2 years to provide a specific funding stream to the gastronomy, and so the 37,500 would be a standalone, but obviously then is included in our budget.
Councillor McMahon.
I think the things that stand out for me with the gastronomy program is the programs in schools, the Verge Gardens, the strategic intent for the MOU with Farm project, which focuses on food security. And I think for us, seeing the tangible outcomes will be the reward.
Thanks, Councillor McMahon. Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Yes, just to reiterate what everyone else has said about the City of Gastronomy funding, just to note that it is in fact a 50% increase from where we were last year, and it is being a 50% for all councils in the north to add it. It gives them a total budget from councils in the north of around $60,000, for which we are providing $37,500. We are the biggest council, we do generate most of that, so we are probably, you could say, it's our fair share, and I'm sure the smaller councils think so. But in addition to that, we are being asked for a further $20,000 for their agriculture event, as well as a community grant, and I think that's perhaps where Councillor Walker might have seen there seemed to be, is this a grant or is it something else? So, you know, in effect, we as a council will be providing close to $60,000 if we give them 20 out of an $80,000 budget. It is still, in my opinion, and I'm sure by the sound of it, of the opinion of most of the other councillors, money well spent. However, I think they, people who are operating the business, I guess, that it is, that the City of Gastronomy, cannot expect to continue to increase or request increases of that size every year from our local governments. They will have to find ways to generate their own forms of income from the restaurants and food providers and others to make their whole thing. But they do so much good. It is very important that at this stage we encourage it, we nurture it, and we do provide the funding to enable them to become the very best City of Gastronomy that they can be, because it is something that it will be here, and if we nurture it correctly for the next, 20, 30, 50, 100 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Are there any other contributions? Councillor Britton, do you wish to close?
Only just to echo that, yes, we probably do need to keep a cap on how much money we do give to them, and it is a big increase this year. But yeah, we are on a global, on a world stage now, and yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea to go with it.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. We'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, raise their hand. Those against? That is all councillors present, including Councillor Pentridge. The motion is carried 11-0 and is therefore carried. In closing the meeting at 3:26, can I thank you for your support, particularly early on in the meeting. The meeting is closed. Thank you.
Do you want to adjourn that?